Mr. Griffith, 5 minutes for questions.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. I'm going to pick up on that real quick. There's a company out of Richmond that I've been really excited about. It's not my district, but it's close enough. And it's the Health Diagnostic Laboratories, and what they do is they do all this stuff on your blood, looking mainly at heart disease and diabetes. And I'm sure they could add to their form a consent in advance, because what they're doing is tracking biomarkers and then giving counseling to the people that they've done the blood work on, obviously with the oversight of the physician, but they're giving counseling and trying to help folks avoid heart disease and diabetes, and a lot of times those biomarkers are overlapping. And it just seems to me that that might be a good place, because they've got folks all over the country that they FedEx in their blood samples to, and they've Henry Forded blood lab work, and it's really exciting stuff. And it just seems to me that might be something that you all could look at and find a way, particularly if they get consent from their patients in advance. You might be able to track some of the biomarkers that you're looking for, or some of the other things that you all are looking for, that you then can get rid of that impediment that you were talking about by having a whole slew of folks automatically identified who may have already given advance consent, at least to be contacted. Yes?
I was going to say, I think the operative word is consent, and as several of us have discussed, it is a matter of designing your consent up front that allows you that capability. And you know, for instance, we have a tool, a technology, Mediguard.org, where we have about almost 3 million patients that we have data, we have a relationship with, but we consent them with them to participate in real-world research with us, et cetera. So I think it's about the consenting and what you put in that up front.
Absolutely. I would never want anybody's information being shared without their consent. What do you find in your getting the consent up front? What do you find? It was about 5 or 10% that say they don't want their data being passed along?
I don't have the metric, but it's interesting how many people want to be in the conversation, how many people are members of different, groups like the ADA, American Diabetes Association, or Multiple Sclerosis, and where they find their communities and how interested they are in research opportunities. And so our database is really, do you want us to communicate with you, because they're all very interested in being part of research.
And you all mentioned it earlier in your testimony today that the technology and things are moving so much faster than they used to move, and it's exciting, and it really has great opportunities. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, although it does connect. I think about these issues of developing new treatments, and I have to tell you, I align with the mindset of those who support right-to-try laws that are being passed in the states, and I've introduced similar bills, 2 such similar bills here. For patients whose doctors have exhausted current medical options and have been told that the end of life is nearing, my feeling is, why should the federal government interfere if the patient wishes to spend their own money on experimental treatment plans? I have this saying, if I'm dying anyway, why do I need to be protected by the FDA? Because death is near, and all treatment options have been tried. That being said, I think the issue of benefit-risk framework should be brought forward in the earlier stages of a study of a new treatment by allowing an informed and responsible access to medications after the establishment of safety could allow for a faster translation of the science and technology from lab to clinic, while ensuring safety, benefiting patients, and at the same time leveraging our nation's leadership and investment to advance science and technology. One of the bills I've introduced, the Patient Choice Act, does this by creating a provisional approval process after a drug safety has been established to allow patients to have access to new treatment while the efficacy is still being tested. This is similar to how things are moving in Europe. I think this makes sense. I think it makes sense to empower a patient, as we've been talking about today, particularly faced with the dilemma of a terminal disease, to help move the ball down the field in the area of medical science and medical knowledge by fighting to save their own life with experimental drugs if they choose to do so, and even if they fail, the satisfaction of knowing that they may have helped save someone else's life. So then the question comes, because I know that a number of you, particularly Dr. Meyer, are generally opposed to this kind of a concept, but when you're faced with the subset of that terminal patient and their doctors have indicated that the current medical options have been exhausted, how do you tell that person that they can't spend their own money to try something that that may not work, but that might hold some promise? Dr. Meyer?
So I'd actually like to address that very point, because actually, from my experience at the FDA, it's usually not the regulators who are standing in the way of that. It's actually more often the companies, and there's a couple of considerations around that. Often they cannot charge, and going through the mechanisms to charge are very arduous, and they have to prove what their investments have been. The other thing is that it ends up dirtying their data, if you will. So you mentioned the patient maybe having the altruistic view of, even if I don't benefit, maybe others will. But unless they're in a trial of some sort, and their data collected in a rigorous fashion, they may not, in fact, contribute meaningful data to the evaluation. So I very much am sympathetic to that view that those patients who have no other options and there's a promising drug out there should get access to it. But I think it really requires a thoughtful look at the ecosystem around that, if you will, and you know, what is the problem, what's the fix?
And Mr. Chairman, my time is up. I know Mr. Murray wants to respond as well, but I have to yield back at this point. But
go ahead, Mr. Murray.
Thank you. I just would say patient choice, we believe, is an important aspect, and also the consideration for devices in that discussion. And to the extent that there are methods and methodologies to streamline how a patient may pay for a procedure, because that is a difficult aspect in this, especially it's in a clinical trial, and how adverse data might be considered if it's not in a controlled environment.
Okay. Chair, thanks, gentlemen. Now I recognize the gentlelady, Mrs. Elmers from North Carolina, 5 minutes for questions.